Have you ever been dominated without even realizing it? Have you ever made decisions thinking they were yours, when in fact, someone had already planted the idea in you? As if you were trapped in an invisible game where every move of yours had already been predicted.
Here, we reveal the 5 Machiavellian rules for total domination, not the ones found in self-help books, but the ones that rule the invisible theater of the human mind, where every gesture, every hesitation, every silence is already a weapon. These rules are not for those who want to be loved. They are for those who want to win. And to win at the most dangerous level, the psychological, where words are distractions, where emotions are weaknesses, and where true power doesn't display itself, it hides. These are strategies inspired by the writings of Machiavelli, by the brutal philosophy of Nietzsche, and by what lies deepest in human nature, the desire to control, and the fear of being controlled. You'll understand how self-control is more destructive than anger, how dominating the environment is more effective than confronting the enemy, and why silence, when well used, becomes a blade that cuts into the other's mind from within. We're not talking about common manipulation. We're talking about emotional engineering, behavioral strategy, psychology as a weapon. And when you master these rules, you don't need to shout. Just a look, an absence, a pause is enough. This is not a video for everyone. It's a video for those who have already realized that the game has begun, but don't know who's moving the pieces. Watch until the end, because at the end of these 5 rules, either you become dangerous or you remain a target. But prepare yourself, because whoever masters these rules will never be dominated again. True power doesn't need to be announced. It doesn't shout, doesn't demand, doesn't present itself with bravado. It infiltrates. It installs itself silently in the behavior of others until they act according to your interests, without realizing, while eyes are fixed on loud leaders, public figures, and personalities that expose themselves. The one who truly dominates is behind the stage, adjusting the strings of the spectacle. This is where invisible domination begins. A cold, strategic, and absolutely lethal art. Machiavelli was one of the first to systematize this kind of power. In The Prince, he advised that the ruler must know when to appear and when to disappear, when to inspire fear and when to hide his hand behind a smile. According to him, the effectiveness of a leader lies not in being loved or hated, but in manipulating others' perceptions with surgical precision. The ideal prince for Machiavelli is the one who knows how to play with appearance, and often the most powerful appearance is emptiness. Nietzsche, on the other hand, speaks of the will to power as an internal force, not domination over others, but an elevation of oneself to the point of overflowing influence. The superior man, for him, doesn't need to impose himself. He radiates control simply because he dominates himself. In this sense, invisible power is born from self-control. When you stay silent, observe, and understand your own impulses, you begin to see others' impulses clearly. And whoever sees clearly manipulates gently. Human nature hates what it doesn't understand. Silence disturbs. Neutrality confuses. The absence of reactions makes people project their own fears and desires onto you. It's in this void of apparent intentions that the invisible dominator operates. He doesn't show his plan. He doesn't defend himself. He doesn't explain. And it's precisely this absence of signals that makes others try to decipher him and, in doing so, reveal their own weaknesses. There's a kind of authority that doesn't need to be declared. It is felt. It's like the gaze of someone who doesn't flinch, doesn't justify himself, doesn't need to prove anything. This kind of presence stirs people's instincts. Deep down, humans are attracted to those who appear to be in control, even without saying a single word. And here lies the greatest strength of invisible power. It generates no resistance, because there is nothing to resist when there is no apparent attack. To dominate without being seen is to manipulate the dynamic without touching the pieces. It is to influence decisions through the environment, not through direct confrontation. One example, instead of directly opposing an idea, which would create resistance, the invisible dominator changes the tone of the conversation, subtly shifts the focus, plants a light doubt. and the idea simply dissolves. He doesn't command, he conditions. There are no shouts, only consequences. This type of power demands coldness. It requires you to resist the childish desire to be recognized, praised, or feared. The need to prove something is the greatest enemy of silent domination. When you remain silent in the face of provocation, when you let the other drown in their own words, when you pretend ignorance while pulling the strings backstage, you stop being a player and become the board itself. Finally, invisible power is the most dangerous, precisely because no one notices it until it's too late. While everyone argues about who sits on the throne, the true dominator is already controlling the food, the doors, the time, and the fear. He doesn't need the title, because he already possesses the structure. Machiavelli prepared princes, Nietzsche prepared gods, and both knew real power doesn't show itself. It is felt. Fighting someone is accepting their rules. It means entering a terrain they already know, at a pace they already control. And while you wear yourself out trying to beat them at their own game, they grow stronger with each of your mistakes. But there is another way to play. A silent, surgical, almost imperceptible way, where you don't try to defeat the opponent, but rather the scenario in which they act. And when the scenario changes, the opponent becomes irrelevant. Machiavelli made this clear. Power is not only in those who make decisions, but in those who define the possibilities. It is better to control the options than to try to convince someone directly. An intelligent prince, according to him, should create situations where any choice the people make benefits him. It is manipulation of the structure, not of the surface. The true ruler does not merely react. He designs the environment so that the conflict resolves before it even begins. Nietzsche, on the other hand, saw the world as a constant struggle of forces, but he did not preach direct battle as the solution. He spoke of the need to create one's own values, that is, to shape the symbolic space where the game of life happens. For him, the superior man is the one who transcends the immediate fight, and instead of lowering himself to the logic of the weak, changes the battlefield. It is no longer about defeating the other. It is about making the other disappear as a threat. In practice, controlling the scenario means acting behind the scenes. It is controlling the emotional atmosphere of a room before the conversation starts. It is placing strategic ideas into circulation, like spraying perfume in the air, without anyone knowing where it came from, but everyone sensing the smell. Whoever controls the context controls the narrative, and whoever controls the narrative shapes the decisions of others, like writing the script of a silent play. Human nature is highly influenced by the environment. Emotions don't appear out of nowhere. They are provoked. A simple visual detail, a tone of voice, a glance, can reprogram someone's brain without them noticing. And this is exactly why the scenario manipulator is so dangerous. He does not attack what you think. He alters the terrain in which you think. You still feel free, but you're only choosing between the paths he has already paved. Think of it like a game of chess. The amateur looks at the pieces. The master looks at the board. The one who dominates the scenario understands that true control does not lie in the power of the rook or the queen, but in silent positioning. He does not enter the fight. He closes the doors. He does not argue. He changes the topic. He does not react. He redirects the room's focus. And thus, the enemy ends up fighting ghosts while he simply observes. This strategy requires patience, reading the environment, and above all, self-mastery. Because controlling the scenario means resisting the impulse for direct confrontation. It means knowing that there is more strength in rearranging the table than in trying to flip someone's cards. The one who controls the environment slowly becomes invisible, but indispensable. He is not the center of the scene. He's the owner of the theater. And in the end, the one who controls the scenario doesn't need to win, because he has already shaped the definition of victory. While others consume themselves trying to defeat the enemy, he simply watches the game unfold. According to the conditions he created himself, the true master of power does not pressure the world. He redraws the walls of the world. And when everyone adapts, without realizing it, he has already won. Comment below. I become invisible if you've learned that the deadliest power is the one no one sees coming. A weakness in the game of power is a mask, and like every good mask, it is used to hide intentions, confuse the opponent, and control the flow of the narrative. Appearing fragile may seem like a mistake, but when well performed, it is a trap. Human beings are conditioned to lower their guard in front of the defenseless. Compassion, moral superiority, disdain, all of this creates space. And it is in that space that the hidden predator enters. Silent, precise, fatal. Machiavelli called this the use of appearances. The prince, he said, does not need to be virtuous. He needs to appear virtuous. And even more, he must know when to appear weak, merciful, hesitant, to gain an advantage from it. The cunning ruler knows that the perception of others is the most powerful weapon in his arsenal. By simulating helplessness, he induces his adversaries into overconfidence. And in that excess, they expose themselves and are destroyed. Nietzsche, in turn, saw this manipulation not as cowardice, but as tragic intelligence. The strong man, for him, is not the one who always imposes his strength, but the one who restrains it, who keeps it like a precious poison, waiting for the right moment to release it. The one who pretends to be small but carries chaos within is more dangerous than 1,000 noisy men. It is the free spirit that seems tamed until it bites. Human nature is naive in the face of apparent weakness. We are taught to associate strength with noise, with grandeur, with display. But real predators move like shadows. They do not impose, they wait. And when everyone believes they're facing prey, that is when it transforms. The attack that comes from weakness always shocks more, because nothing was expected of it at all. This strategy also operates on the emotional level, showing vulnerability, whether authentic or performed, disarms. The other person lowers their walls, reveals intentions, exposes weaknesses, and then the game flips. The one who seemed weak now holds all the information, all the advantage, all the ammunition. It is not about being fragile. It is about using the appearance of fragility as an invisible weapon. The one who understands the power of false weakness stops fighting for space. He lets others advance, get excited, believe they have won. Meanwhile, he watches, collects, positions himself. He becomes the harmless one in the game. The one no one fears, the one everyone forgets until he decides to act. And at that moment, no one is prepared for the strength that was hidden. But this tactic requires a trained ego because it wounds vanity. Most people want to be seen as strong, admired, feared, but the true player prefers to be underestimated because he knows that silent victory is safer. He prefers to laugh inside while the other celebrates victory. He is in no rush, because his strength does not lie in imposition, but in the precision of the invisible strike. And so, the one who disguises himself as prey dominates as a predator, because in the end, the one who believes they have the advantage rarely protects themselves. And the most effective attack is not the one everyone expects. It is the one no one believes is possible. Weakness, when well rehearsed, is the sweet poison that leads the enemy to drink with a smile. And the one who understands this learns to kill without ever showing the blade. Remaining silent is strategic. Silence is not absence. It is total presence. A presence that disturbs, that displaces, that forces the other to deal with their own noise. When you respond to everything, you become predictable. But when you choose silence, you become a black mirror. The other speaks and begins to hear themselves. And that is where mastery begins. Not by shouting louder, but by being the only one who doesn't need to shout. Machiavelli understood silence as a weapon. A wise prince, he said, must know how to hide his intentions. And few tools do that more masterfully than silence. The absence of explanation creates mystery. The lack of response generates tension. A ruler who talks too much becomes a target, but the one who does not reveal himself becomes impossible to attack. How do you fight a plan that has never been spoken? Nietzsche, in turn, saw silence as the mark of greatness. The superior spirit is not hasty, does not get lost in futile debates, does not waste itself in automatic reactions. He observes, he chooses, He waits for the moment when action is worth more than 1,000 words. True power does not need to prove itself all the time. It asserts itself through what it refuses to respond to. Silence, in this sense, is the affirmation of a strength that does not bend to the anxiety of others. Human nature, however, fears the void. Prolonged silence is like an abyss. Whoever stares into it ends up projecting their own fears onto it, and that is why it is so corrosive. When you remain silent, the other begins to fill that space with assumptions. They torture themselves trying to understand what you are thinking, and the more they try, the more they lose themselves. Silence, in this sense, is an invisible prison the other walks into voluntarily. Not reacting is a choice, and one of the hardest, because it requires mastery over oneself, over pride, over the impulse to justify. But when well executed, silence becomes a dance of control. The other attacks, and you do not move. The other demands, and you remain calm. And suddenly, they begin to lose control, because their power fed on your reaction. And without it, they rot from within. This kind of psychological mastery creates a hidden hierarchy. The one who talks too much seems desperate. The one who remains silent seems unshakable. And in the social jungle, the one who appears unshakable always occupies the top of the chain, even if they say not a single word, even if they only observe. Silence here is not emptiness. It is total presence, like the sky before the storm. But be careful, true silence is not passive. It is not cowardice. It is a choice. It is tense, calculated, full of intention. It is the silence of someone who hears everything, processes everything, and acts only when they know each word will be a precise shot. It is not omission, it is aim. And in the end, the one who remains silent does not flee, they dominate. Because they have learned that control does not lie in the immediate reaction, but in the precise response or in the absence of it. While the world screams in desperation, the one who is silent creates space. And in that space, they plant their invisible power and harvest total domination. Most people spend their lives trying to control the world, the situations, the others. But they fail to realize that the most untamable enemy lies within. Their emotions, their impulses, their insecurities. This is the true battlefield. As long as you have not mastered yourself, everything you do will be a reaction. And whoever reacts has already lost. True power begins where a lack of control ends. Mastering oneself is, paradoxically, the most subversive act of all, because it turns the individual into something the system does not know how to manipulate. Machiavelli knew that the prince who does not master his affections will be a slave to his own mistakes. He said, "It is necessary for the prince to be able to disguise his nature well. But how do you disguise what you do not even know?" Political dissimulation begins with inner discipline. The prince who yields to anger, to pride, to fear, surrenders the throne of his mind to randomness. But the one who masters his inner demons commands kingdoms without raising his voice. Nietzsche deepens this thought by saying that the human being must become his own legislator. For him, true freedom does not lie in doing what one wants, but in creating a will strong enough to resist one's own abysses. To master oneself is to be simultaneously the sculptor and the marble. It is to accept the pain of self-confrontation as the price of greatness. And it is precisely for this reason that few do it, because it is violent, it is bloody, it is lonely. Human nature resists self-control. We are biologically programmed to react, to seek comfort, to flee from pain. But whoever wants real power must act against their programming, must break internal cycles, recondition impulses, destroy illusions. Because only when you stop being predictable to yourself do you become unpredictable to the world. And the unpredictable always frightens, always dominates. Self-mastery is not rigidity, it is conscious flexibility. It is knowing when to be silent and when to speak, when to act and when to wait, when to let it hurt and when to let go. It is the ability to observe your own thoughts without merging with them, to feel anger and not become the anger, to recognize fear but use it as a map, A man who masters his feelings is not cold, he is precise. And whoever is precise never wastes power. The most dangerous thing about self-mastery is what it allows: inner freedom. Because from the moment no one else can provoke you, control you, destabilize you, you become untouchable. You are no longer pushed by the environment, by applause, by criticism. You move by strategy, not by impulse. And in that moment, you cease to be a common human and begin to become a strategist of destiny. But there is a cost. To master oneself is to kill parts of oneself. It is to face deep fears, buried traumas, fantasies of power. It is to let go of the idealized image of oneself. It is to lose the comfort of victimhood and take full responsibility. And that is brutal. But it is only in that brutality that the true silent warrior is born. The one who has already conquered himself, no longer needs to prove anything to anyone. And in the end, this is the most dangerous victory of all, because it cannot be taken away, because it transforms, because it silences. The man who possesses himself becomes inviolable territory. He does not need to dominate others. He attracts them, disarms them, defeats them, just by existing. Because nothing is more terrifying than someone who has already conquered their own chaos. Power does not disappear. It merely changes hands. And those who truly dominate do not need titles, positions, or applause. They act between the lines, through the atmospheres they create, through the silences they impose. The game does not end when you win. It continues, inside the other. And that is where true domination happens. When your presence shapes someone else's behavior, even in your absence. When you no longer need to control, because everything around you already organizes itself so as not to confront you. The Machiavellian rules are not about gratuitous cruelty. They are about lucidity, about understanding that the human being is driven by deep forces: fear, desire, vanity, pain, and that by mastering those forces within oneself and in others, you rise to a level where the noise of the world no longer reaches you. Nietzsche would call this the birth of the higher spirit, someone who does not follow the rules because they write them, someone who does not seek power but becomes power itself. But this transformation demands sacrifice. It demands silence when pride wants to scream. It demands weakness when the ego wants to impose itself. It demands observing instead of attacking, dominating the setting, becoming prey, going silent, manipulating the invisible. All of this requires more than courage. It requires coldness, clarity, patience. That is why few get there. But those who do rarely return to being the same. Because in the end, the game goes on, always. Only now, the one moving the pieces is you. And the most dangerous thing of all is that no one realizes they're already playing your game. Don't leave just yet. I have a challenge for you. If you've made it this far, do the following. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me, which of these 5 rules have you seen someone use against you? And which one do you plan to use first? Answer, if you dare. Some think this was the end, but be careful. The war is not over yet. There are still things that have not been said. These 2 videos in front of you are not here by accident. One of them talks about an invisible pattern that might explain why you sabotage yourself precisely when things start going well. But I won't tell you which one. You'll have to risk the click. So, which one will you choose?